11 to 4. 20 artists will be featured at 6 studios located throughout the city of Aztec. Paintings, sculpture, pottery, jewelry, drawings, and fabric are all featured, plus all sizes and price points. Find out more online at Aztec Artist Studio Tour on Facebook or follow the signs Saturday and Sunday, October 8th and 9th. "11 minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Thursday morning, the 6th day of October already, 2022. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin, and thank you for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM, of course, over the air here in San Juan County, 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and streaming everywhere else on the planet from our website at ksje.com. Welcome also to our viewers who are watching the visual radio part of the program. It is streaming out live today to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. We are glad that you are with us, everyone, because coming up this morning, our topic once again is archaeology, and this morning we'll be talking about archaeology and Native American input with some of the things that are going on in our local area. That conversation begins in the next few moments right here on KSJE, so stay tuned for that. Later on this hour, we'll be checking in with Thomas Heuser from the San Juan Symphony. It is concert weekend this weekend in both Farmington and Durango. The opening of the Symphony's, 37th season in the Four Corners. We'll be talking about their concert that's coming up today at 8:45 on KSJE with music director Thomas Heuser. Next hour, of course, Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts, and he is featuring some music from Tchaikovsky, among others. You'll hear that today after the news at 9:06 on KSJE. Don't forget, of course, in addition to connecting with us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, you can check out our Instagram page as well. And if you're a podcast person, this program, as well as all the other local programs we produce, become podcasts, and you can subscribe for free and listen to them wherever you listen to podcasts, places like iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcasts and Pandora. The list goes on and on. So we encourage you to subscribe to KSJE Podcast to stay up to date on some of our local programs. Outside our studios this morning at San Juan College, a partly cloudy Thursday morning so far. Temperature 51 degrees at the moment. We've got a 50% chance of showers in the forecast today with a mostly cloudy day. 68 for a high in Farmington, 48 overnight tonight. Maybe some more sunshine and clouds tomorrow with a high near 70 on Friday, but another chance of rain showers in the forecast for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, with highs all 3 days near 70 and overnight lows in the mid to upper 40s. So fall is definitely in the air. And let me introduce my guests who are here with me this morning, as I mentioned, to discuss archaeology and working with Native American tribes throughout the Southwest. Paul Reed is back with me, of course, for his regular visit from his home in the Taos area. Paul, good morning. Good to see you as always. Good morning, Paul. Paul's there, so he is standing by. I think he can hear me. And so we will connect with him in just a moment. And also joining us for the program today, Kellum Throgmorton is here from the Crow Canyon Archaeology Center near Cortez, Colorado. Kellum, good morning to you. I'm assuming you can hear me.
I can, Scott. Good morning.
All right. Thank you very much. Good to see you, sir, and thank you for joining us. Let's start with you, Kellum, if you don't mind, and give us maybe a little bit of a synopsis about the work that you do and the folks at Crow Canyon does in the area.
Absolutely. So I'm Kellum Throgmorton. I'm the field director at the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center here in Cortez, Colorado. Crow Canyon's been around for 40 years. We're actually coming up on our 40th year of providing archaeological research and experiential education. One of our primary goal is to empower present and future generations by making the human past accessible and relevant through archaeological research, experiential education, and American Indian knowledge. These three things are the triumvirate of what we work on here at Crow Canyon.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you for being with us. We'll get back to you in just a moment. Let me go back and see if Paul Reed's able to hear me now. Paul, are you able to hear me on your connection? He's not, because he just disappeared. All right, Kellum, I'm coming back to you because it's live radio, and if you don't mind, with the work that you're doing at Crow Canyon then, and our focus today is on Native American input and working with tribes. I know there's a lot of certainly Native American tribes in the area of Crow Canyon, of course, and so you're working closely with many of them on some of the work that you're doing?
We are, absolutely. Crow Canyon sits on ancestral land of the Pueblo, Ute, Dene people, Hickory, Apache, and we make a real effort to collaborate and work with the tribes around us as much as possible. We've had a Pueblo advisory group since the mid-90s, and that's formed the core of a lot of our decision-making and the archaeological work we do. Currently, the Pueblo advisory group has been helping with a variety of projects. We've had folks, Teresa Pascual from Acoma Pueblo, recently helped us with a National Endowment for the Humanities trip down to Chaco Canyon, Salmon Pueblo, and Aztec Pueblo in Aztec, New Mexico. That was a great project. We brought teachers from around the country. I believe there were 25 of them who came, traveled through the Southwest with us, with myself, with Dr. Ben Bellarado, and with Teresa Pascual from Acoma. It provided a really great multivocal approach to understanding the archaeology of the area. These educators put together a variety of curricula that they took back to their home schools. Some of them were kindergarten teachers, some of them were high school teachers, and they're going to bring the message of Crow Canyon and a much greater understanding of the culture and the history of the Four Corners region to all of their students around the country. So that's one of the really big things that the Pueblo Advisory Group worked on over the last couple of months.
Very good. And we've been hearing from Paul Reed in our discussions about Chaco Canyon that, a lot of these Pueblo groups and Native American tribes in the region certainly claim some ancestry, some connections to places like Chaco and other places around the Southwest. Is that what you find as well with the work that you're doing at Crow Canyon?
Absolutely. I myself, I would consider myself a Chaco scholar from the archaeological end of things. And most of, if not all of the tribes in New Mexico, Arizona, some up here in Colorado, they all have ties to Chaco Canyon in one way or another. So that's why when we take trips down there with Crow Canyon, we have made a real effort to include tribal stakeholders in all of these projects. As we head down and take participants to Chaco, they get a real perspective from both ourselves and our tribal partners. It's a process called multivocality. We're really looking to say, here's an archaeological way of looking at things. Here is a Native American way of looking at things. At times, there's great congruence. At other times, there's divergences. And it's it's in those spaces that I think the public learns a lot about the archaeology of the area.
And for these groups, Kellum Throgmorton, it's really an important visit, I would think, and from what we have heard too on this program that Paul Reed has brought to us as well, for some of these pueblos and tribes, it's really an important piece of their story, of their history, and that's an important thing, an important connection, I guess, to maintain over these years.
It is. I can't speak for tribal nations, but from what I've seen as we do visit, it's an important thing for them to return to these ancestral places and make those kinds of connections. That's another thing that we've been working on a lot, is trying to use some of our research to build connections between tribal nations and some of the archaeological heritage that has perhaps been a little difficult to access. Another project we've got that's being helmed by Dr. Ben Bellarado, he's got a project called Sandal Biographies, where he's working with two Pueblo weavers, Chris Lewis from Zuni and Louis Garcia, who's Tiwa and Piro. And they're working with museum professionals to document sandals that are housed at Mesa Verde National Park. These are sandals that were taken from pueblos and cliff dwellings in the park in the late 19th century, and many of them have been stored in repositories for over 100 years. And so part of the idea here is to make these items, these important and complicated items that have not really been available for either the public or for tribal members to see, to make these things accessible for archaeologists to study them, and also for tribal members to take a look at them have input, describe what they're seeing, and also to take back knowledge to their home places and really have greater access to the kinds of archaeological collections that have been difficult to access.
Very good, very good. Let me come back to Paul Reed now for a moment. Paul, third time's the charm. I'm going to try to see if you can hear me this time, and I think you can.
Yeah. Good morning, Scott.
Hello, Paul Reed.
Little technical stuff going, but I think we're flying high now.
I can see you and I can hear you, and that's the important thing. And Kellum did a great job of helping us fill in a little bit till you got your connection back going once again. But he's been talking a little bit about the work at Crow Canyon, of course, and a little bit about Chaco. And you know, I've talked about Chaco before, and so again, it kind of continues our conversation about the importance of bringing in Native American pueblos and tribes and others as the work that you all are doing in the field of archaeology and some of these discoveries and some of the knowledge that we are still learning about these areas that literally dot the landscape here in the Four Corners region.
Right, exactly. You know, and as Kellum noted, Crow Canyon has really been way out in front on this, setting up their Pueblo advisory team in the 90s and, you know, really for decades now, bringing in different Pueblo scholars, other Native scholars to be part of their program. And, you know, that's something really that at Archaeology Southwest, we've looked at Crow Canyon as a model for that. And as you know, we've greatly expanded how we are focusing on connecting to descendant communities, to indigenous communities. Because, you know, as Kellum noted, this is their heritage, and these are very special, important places. And for indigenous folks, this goes well beyond the research potential of an archaeological site or even studying the history. Those are important aspects, and we have many indigenous colleagues and friends who map onto that. But for other people, it's a much deeper emotional connection. So, you know, we've talked about that a little, Scott. For me, that's been the big part of the last 10 years or so of connecting with different groups on Chaco, is just seeing how important, you know, places like Chaco, ancestral places, are to indigenous folks.
Right. And Paul Reed, can you tell us the connection, maybe, if there is one, I think there is, between maybe the Chaco Canyon or the San Juan River area of New Mexico and the area where Kellum is and near the Cortez area? I mean, this certainly was interconnected in the time that we're talking about, in the period of Chaco Canyon and things like that, was it not?
Sure. I mean, you know, the way we frame Greater Chaco sort of at its largest boundaries, it goes well through the Four Corners area. So if we look at, you know, just for an example, the peak of Chaco in society just prior to about 1100, we've got coverage sites, people, road networks, active trade, social interaction across an area that, you know, is the size of the state of Indiana, or of course, one of my favorite analogies, the country of Ireland. So something like 30 million acres of the Four Corners states, you know, with a big chunk in New Mexico, but, you know, pretty much the entire southwest corner of Colorado was part of this. We have indigenous development of communities from way back, you know, 2,500, even 3,000 years ago, people sort of getting on this Pueblo farming path, as we might talk about it. And then the development of these different communities through the Basket Maker 2 and 3 periods into the Pueblo periods, and eventually joining up with the Chacoan system during its couple hundred years, you know, of really extreme florescence, if we want to look at it that way. And then going through the post-Chacoan period, some migrations, you know, that had the area pretty depopulated by 1300. So yeah, it's part of this just amazing central area of the Pueblo world and the indigenous world. And yeah, so Southwest Colorado. The other distinction that I think is up there, and Kellum knows this much more better than I do, is the density of archaeological sites in Southwest Colorado, and then just going across the line into Utah is just tremendous. You know, folks have talked about there being more archaeological cultural sites really than almost any other zone on the planet. So just phenomenal.
Interesting. Very interesting. Kellum Throgmorton, let me turn to you with some of that to add a little bit about just how many sites there are, or just how much, you know, how big of a society, a culture was there in the Crow Canyon area that we're talking about and their connection to Chaco.
Well, I can't remember the specific number of archaeological sites in the county, Montezuma County here in southwest Colorado, but it is certainly a lot. And part of the reason for that is this area was incredibly populous. Pueblo ancestors here numbered in the thousands and tens of thousands. And I think the statistic I've seen is that the number of people living in Montezuma County today only surpassed the estimated population of native peoples here in the last decade or so. And so We're talking 25 or 30,000 people were living here in the greater Mesa Verde region at the end of the Pueblo III period. That would be about 1250. It's also got one of the highest densities of Chaco-related sites. Archaeologists call these sites outliers, Chacoan outliers, because they are not in Chaco Canyon. We recently put together a symposium at our national conference that brought together archaeologists doing research on Chaco, native advisors who are also working with Chacoan sites. And one of the interesting outcomes of that is we've been calling these sites outliers for a long, long time. And our native stakeholders said, why are you calling them outliers? These are all important ancestral sites. We don't want to give the impression that one is any more important than the other. They all have connections to current and living Pueblo people.
Interesting, very interesting. And so talk to me a little bit more about this, your advisory group that Paul Reed was mentioning, and you mentioned as well, of course, and the importance of getting their input on some of the things that you are doing, the projects that you're undertaking, and I mean Crow Canyon, and some of the other things that you're working on.
A great example of that, Scott, is our current sort of flagship excavation project is at a place called the Haney site. It's a huge village, dates from about 750 AD until maybe 1225. Those are our best dates right now. So that's the Pueblo I through Pueblo III period. And we've been working there for 5 years. It's a Chacoan site. A lot of our questions as archaeologists hinge on what are the connections between these places in southwest Colorado, like the Haney site and Chaco Canyon. But last year, we had been excavating a kiva, working in part of a kiva, and as we encountered objects on the floor of this particular kiva, the bells went off in our head that it really appeared to be a ritual assemblage. Now, these kivas sometimes we call it closed down, is the term archaeologists use. When their use life as a structure or a kiva is over, people leave items in very specific ways to continue doing work after that structure is no longer part of daily life. Knowing that, we thought, let's bring in some of our Pueblo advisors from this Pueblo advisory group, and we have some ideas of how we'd like to handle them. So Chris Toya from Jemez actually came up, and we said, Chris, we think that these items were meant to be here. It's not just haphazard things people left behind. And our idea was perhaps we would rebury those items in situ after we'd finished conducting an analysis. And so it was through dialogue with Chris Toya and other people from Jemez Pueblo that we came up with a plan for analyzing and reburying these objects, and people from Jemez assisted in that reburial. As far as I know, this was a relatively novel approach to dealing with these ritual assemblages. We're still discussing the repercussions, both from a research perspective, but also from the perspective of working more closely in a collaborative sense with the tribes in the area.
And so it sounds to me that this consultation gave you a bit more insight, perhaps, into what you were looking at and what you had found at this site.
Absolutely. We have a much better idea of how people used these kinds of places in the past, and it really drew connections between ancestral folks who lived at the Haney site and contemporary Pueblo people who may be at a distance from the place, but certainly still have connections. And it did reaffirm some of our archaeological interpretations about the importance of these structures and how they are to be treated.
Right, very true. And Paul Reed, let me come back to you, because you and I have talked a lot about the importance of having representatives of Native American Pueblos and tribes at the table, and maybe at the place where these discoveries are being made, maybe to provide some of these insights and things along this line, and important for folks like Kellum to reach out to get their input about what we're looking at, what they're looking at.
Right, right. As Kellum noted, I think what the process they went through, treating those human remains in that particular context with great sensitivity, with great consultation, I think that's really what we ought to be doing in archaeology. And this is something that internally at Archaeology Southwest, we're going through a process right now. A couple of our team members who are Indigenous folks have recently put together a model for how we should partner with tribes in different parts of the Southwest. Of course, Archaeology Southwest is in Tucson, so a lot of our work is Arizona focused, but I've worked for the organization for a couple of decades now with doing work in New Mexico. So we're doing a series of outreach events, if you will, on a process to see how, with future work that we do and with ongoing work, to the extent that we can do that, we can involve tribes, indigenous communities, the descendant communities who are closely tied to the different places on the landscape that we certainly consider special as archaeologists. And in talking to folks, indigenous folks, they consider them very special as well. So I think one of the advantages, in the period of time that we're in American archaeology, and certainly focused in the Four Corners, is that we have tribes who want to talk to archaeologists about these types of cooperative projects. They're looking to partner, and almost all of my archaeological colleagues in Kellum's, I think, we're really brainstorming at this point is how do we take a trajectory that's existed in American archaeology for decades and not necessarily shut it down, but how do we have it evolve into something that is truly cooperative, truly collaborative, that can bring in Native perspectives, indigenous perspectives, and not just at the end of a project, but as we go through the entire process, so that we're also deriving research interests, research questions, what we talk about in our field somewhat dryly as our research designs, so that those reflect the input of the groups who are descended from these amazing places on our landscape. So, yeah, as we've talked before, Scott, it's a really exciting time in Southwestern archaeology.
Indeed, and to hear a little bit about some of these population numbers and I think we mentioned this before, Paul Reed, that the Four Corners area has for a long time supported tens of thousands of people, and that seems to be the case as well. And this goes back to, I guess, the whole idea of protections and things along that line. Kellum Throgmorton, maybe again for the perspective from Crow Canyon and in the area there in southwest Colorado and the area of southeastern Utah, these protections then and these Native American groups having a voice, a louder voice maybe, that's got to help with advising maybe some governmental agencies about the importance of protecting some of these sites, when maybe if we hadn't heard their voices, that wouldn't be such a concern or a priority for some of these governmental agencies.
That's totally true, Scott. And first, I wanted to clarify, at the Haney site, we haven't been working with human remains. These were objects of cultural patrimony, which are, I think people forget, included under some of the legislation that does deal with human remains. But back to your question, Scott, there's several ways that we've been trying to work with developing greater protections for cultural resources broadly construed. Dr. Bellarado here, for example, has got the Utah Canyon Country Cultural Landscapes Project, which, among other things, is trying to create a virtual reality module that can be placed at visitor centers for the new Bears Ears National Monument, which hopefully will reduce some of the visitation to really fragile sites out there on Cedar Mesa, where things are being loved to death, is the term we like to use, in that so much vegetation occurs that the sites are negatively impacted. Now, we want people to experience them in some way, and I believe the tribes are interested in that as well. They really want to assert that these are their cultural properties. These are places important to them. And by developing this module, hopefully it'll give a lot of visitors an experience without actually bringing them to a site where the traffic of thousands of feet has a real negative impact. Another thing that Crow Canyon is working on in that vein is our American Indian Initiatives Department. They are collaborating with Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, as well as the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, to bring Ute elders out to provide cultural expertise on rock art panels out in the National Monument, Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. And discussions like that have a big effect on How do we manage visitation to sites? How do we educate the public so that these sites remain intact for future generations?
Right, and that's an issue that's happening, I know, throughout the country, it seems, even at national parks and what have you, right, with the very large amounts of visitors who want to see these things and have a right to see these things, but to do it in a managed and responsible way, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
It is, yes. Visitation just continues to increase as the public's interest continues to increase. That's probably a byproduct of the educational message that a lot of places are getting out and trying to raise the profile of some of the research that gets done. That's a big push, is to say, how do we get research out to the public, but also deal with some of the consequences of that, handle it in a responsible fashion.
Right, very true. Thank you very much. And we're just about out of time this morning, gentlemen. Paul Reed, let me turn to you maybe for the last word this morning on our conversation, though, just how important it is to have these other groups involved in some of these conversations as you are making new discoveries, looking at past sites, and just trying to understand what we're dealing with.
Right, definitely. And again, I really want to call out Kellum and Crow Canyon for the work that they're doing. They, again, have been on board with their Pueblo advisory group since the 90s and really have helped establish one of the models that we follow in Southwest archaeology for working with tribes and descendant communities. And again, for me, it kind of circles back to not so much a limiting of the archaeology that we've done. I think what we're doing in our field is taking a really hard look at our past practices. We're thinking about the present and how to improve those. And we're really looking towards a future where we have many more indigenous and native archaeologists and cultural advisors and specialists who can really manage the ancestral sites, the places that are special to their individual groups. And this is something that, to call out the Park Service, they have active programs for hiring indigenous folks to work in the positions in their parks on their own ancestral lands. So, we really are at a pretty exciting time in doing things. And, there's an awful lot of hard work that's going to go into this to, make the efforts to recruit young college-age indigenous and native peoples, and really to sort of address what archaeology has done in the past and say, we understand that archaeology is not necessarily something that has been praiseworthy from native perspectives, from other perspectives over these decades. But at this point, again, I think our discipline, I think American archaeology, and I think what we're doing in the Southwest, we're all very committed to bringing in native perspectives and really making a fundamental shift in the way we think about how we're understanding the very dynamic past in our region.
Right. Right, and it seems to me that the tribes are dedicated to being involved with this when they are asked and invited.
Yes, we've had great participation on a number of projects. One of the issues, of course, is we're still emerging from the COVID pandemic, and so there are issues there, with safety issues and just sort of tribes getting back up to capacity. And, the reality is we just need many more people in different groups and different tribes to be able to engage with this process, because a lot of times people, Kellum mentioned Teresa Pasquale, who runs the Acoma Cultural Office, and she's an amazing person, does a whole lot of things, but Teresa gets so many requests to do different things, to collaborate. We essentially need a larger staff for Teresa at Acoma and across many of the other groups. So this is something on the educational front that, we're very interested in, and other groups are too.
Right. But it sounds like things are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, it's certainly my opinion. And I hope that our indigenous colleagues and friends feel that way as well.
Very good. Well, Paul Reed with Archaeology Southwest, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it very much. Kellum Throgmorton from the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, thank you for joining us as well. Both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you both.
Great to be here.
Thank you both very, very much. My guest this morning right here on KSJE. KSJE and San Juan College present the Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week.
Hello, this is Emin Chi from the Student Achievement Center. This week, we're bringing you coaching tips of the week for week 7. Taking good notes. Studying starts in the classroom. pay attention and take good notes. So when you're studying later, you're just reviewing information. Speak with your professor about recording lectures on your phone. A recording can complement your notes so you can go back and re-listen to the information in case there are other details you pick up on later to note. Effective note-taking strategies can have a direct impact on your study habits and is one of the most important study tips for college.
The Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week, presented by KSJE and the Student Achievement Center at San Juan College. Connect with the Pulse during the San Juan Symphony's 37th season, coming up Saturday, October 8th at 7:30 p.m. in Farmington and Sunday, October 9th at 3 p.m. in Durango. The Symphony presents French masterpieces by Maurice Ravel, Claude Debussy, Eric Satie, and many others in a program called Bolero French Impressions. Music director Thomas Heuser will introduce the program in a free pre-concert talk 1 hour before the concert. Find out more at sanjuansymphony.org. KSJE is supported by Aztec Motocross. Located on Highway 173, Aztec Motocross offers a safe and competitive racing environment for the growing off-road and outdoor industry. Upcoming racing weekends, September 24th and 25th, and October 22nd and 23rd. Also, the New Mexico State Championship Motocross Race Series, October 8th and 9th. Find out more online at aztecmotocross.com or 505-393-5222.
Elon Musk says the Twitter deal